They've released 17 studio albums, resulting in over 200 million albums sold worldwide, including Back in Black, selling 50 million copies, making it the highest-selling album in rock history. With sold-out stadiums, arenas, and concert venues over the last 40 years, and their latest album, Power Up, released in late 2020. AC/DC remains one of the greatest rock bands in the world, and we're going to talk about it. This is For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast, with your hosts Eddie Payne and Tommy Pearson.
And welcome back to another episode of For Those About to Talk, the AC/DC podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Payne, and coming to us from across the way is Mr. Tommy Pearson, the AC/DC guru.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
So it's safe to say that I can call you that now from now on, right?
Yeah. I've come to terms with it. I know that I'm going to say some things wrong, and some people can write in and complain about it, and I'll be sure to not read that. Hey, I was just thinking, we should have a different intro. Since it's Payne and Pearson, we could have an intro that says PNP.
That's pretty cool, actually. We'll have to copyright that so nobody takes it. I'll get Jerry James on that right now. Today's episode, this is episode 4. What are we at? 4 now? Episode 4.
Yeah, rocking right along.
Today we're going to do all the Brian Johnson albums. We're going to pick our favorite song off of each album. So this ought to be pretty interesting because there's so many songs, so many ways that this could go. You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
I'll go first. I'll start with Back in Black, and we can move on from there. And just so everybody knows, I'm doing mine right off the top of my head. I've got the CDs in front of me. I'm going to pick them up and look at the song titles, and I'm just going to blurt out whichever one is my favorite one today. Now, we just did an episode of the podcast. We just recorded another one 15 minutes ago, and at that time, I said my favorite song off of Back in Black was Giving the Dog a Bone. So I'm not going to change that. I would still say that my favorite song off of Back in Black is Giving a Dog a Bone for right now. But if you ask me tomorrow, if you ask me next week, it could be any of those other songs.
All right, for Back in Black, it's going to be, well, You Shook Me All Night Long, still the same as it was.
There you go. No need in changing something from 15 minutes ago. Look, I didn't even change my shirt. I got the same shirt on. People are gonna start to recognize that our podcast, we seem to have the same clothes on every 2 episodes.
You'll see it the next week. You'll see the different episode the next week, but we recorded at the same time. So.
There you go. All right, so moving on to For Those About to Rock, another one. I mean, there's tons of good songs on every album, and probably my choice on most of these is going to be a little bit unusual. Like for Those About to Rock, it'd be real easy to Put the Finger on You or the title track, but for my money, my favorite song on it is Snowballed. Killer riff at the beginning of that song, and the whole song is just tough sounding, man, and got cool lyrics and stuff. Great tune.
I think for me, it's going to be title track For Those About to Rock.
Can't miss with that, man. Come on.
Yeah, it's like it hits you hard,
Yeah, man. Flick of the Switch, definitely a different sounding record for them. Still a good amount of decent songs in there, and there's several that I could choose. But in this particular case, and this is probably going to be unusual for me, I'm going to choose the title track, Flick of the Switch. I think that's probably my favorite cut off the Flick of the Switch album.
For me, Flick of the Switch, I'll have to agree with you there. Flick of the Switch, I hadn't heard it until honestly, about 2 months ago when Brian's like, oh, let's do Flick of the Switch. And I was like, I've never heard that song. I'll have to check it out. And lo and behold, as soon as I heard it, I was like, damn, why haven't we played this before,
Yeah.
It's a really, I like this song a lot, and it's kicks ass.
It's a lot of good songs on that album, but they're a little bit different. That Flick of the Switch is the one that, I mean, in 10 seconds, you know exactly who it is. I mean, it's got the big power chords, and then the little riff in between. But good Lord, I mean, it's a very stereotypical AC/DC song.
And Flick of the Switch was it was not Phil Rudd on drums. It was actually Simon Wright.
Well, Phil recorded it.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, Phil recorded the drums for Flick of the Switch and left after it was recorded. They got Simon in before they started playing live. They got Simon in before they started making the videos because, they had 2 or 3 videos, which was basically them in rehearsals for the album. I think they had a video for Flick of the Switch. They had one for Guns for Hire. And I don't know if they got around to doing one for Rise in Power or Houses on Fire, one of those other tracks, or not. But they definitely had one for Guns for Hire and Flick of the Switch, and they were just rehearsal videos, and Simon was in both of those.
Yeah, I remember seeing those. So the drums that you hear on the Flick of the Switch album were actually Phil Rudd?
Yeah.
All right. That's pretty cool, because they actually groove pretty hard.
Yeah, the drum beat that he does on Rise and Power, the first track, he throws that little offbeat tom hit in there, which is a weird thing, something that was unusual for Phil because he's a pretty straight ahead drummer, which is one of the reasons I love him. But he threw this extra little, tunk, just a quick tom hit in between his beats on the first song, Rise and Power, which is a pretty cool little technique. I liked it.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to the next album, which is Fly on the Wall. Pretty good album. Had a bunch of videos. They did a long form video. Back then it was on VHS. I think it had 5 or 6 songs on it. A lot of good choices on this one as well. I have 2 choices on this one as my favorite songs. The videos were Fly on the Wall, Shake Your Foundations, First Blood, Danger, and Sink the Pink, and Stand Up too, I think it had a video. That's 6. So it had a bunch of videos, but my favorite songs on it, I'm unique in this, most people don't like these 2, are Sin for the Man, which is the last song on it, tough sounding as hell, and Playing with Girls, which is a real fast, just driving ass song, man. But nobody likes those songs but me.
This was one of those albums we discussed in the last episode where they have a lot of albums that have some filler on them. Well, this is one of those albums, but the one song that I can pick off of this album as my favorite is Sink the Pink.
Great tune, man. Nothing wrong with that at all. This is a weird album. AC/DC has done this a couple of times, in my opinion. To me, if you look at this album, this Fly on the Wall album, probably the weakest song on the entire album is Danger. And that was the first single and video, which I never understood that. It's kind of like Def Leppard when they came out with the Hysteria album and the first single off of it was Women. I was like, what? I mean, I bought that album right when it came in. I was like, my God, I hear 4 or 5 other songs that are better than Women that could have been a single. And sure enough, they ended up releasing all those songs as singles.
Right.
But it was just a weird choice to me that, Women, and same for AC/DC with Fly on the Wall. I thought Danger was a strange, weak choice when they could have used. I probably would have started like with your favorite song. I think Sink the Pink was probably the one that had the most single potential.
And I know we had discussed in the past about the band actually doing at least one single from every album from AC/DC. This would be the one to do off Fly on the Wall, I believe.
Yeah, Sink the Pink? Yeah, probably so.
I'm trying to see here. The singles on this album, sorry I don't know the stuff off the top of my head like Mr. Eddie Trunk does. So Eddie Trunk, if you're listening or watching, come on the podcast and help us out so we can remember all this shit. Let's see here. Sink the Pink was released as the second single released in 85. Danger was the first one. And Shake Your Foundations.
Oh, they did release? Oh, cool.
Yep, that was a single.
Yeah, and those were all on that long form video, along with Fly on the Wall, Stand Up, I believe. So yeah, and the video was different for them. It was the first time they had like a little storyline that ran through. They were playing in a bar, and they played all these songs, and the bar hates them at first, and then they get into the music the longer it goes, and by the time they get to the song Shake Your Foundations, the whole bar is collapsing. They tried.
Yeah, and I believe they had pretty much the same setting for those videos that they did from that album.
Yeah, all of them were the exact. It was the same room, same stage, same characters in the background and stuff. So the next album is a weird one. It's the Who Made Who album, and if you're going to pick your favorite Brian Johnson song off of that one, you have to pick Who Made Who, because there was only 3 new songs on that album, and that's the only one that had vocals. They had the 2 instrumentals, DT and Chase the Ace, which are both cool songs. I especially like the song called DT. It's an instrumental, but it's a really heavy and cool, stomping ass, almost Zeppelin-y kind of groove, real heavy, and used in the Who Made Who, or it used in the Maximum Overdrive, I should say, soundtrack. And there's some other stuff in the Maximum Overdrive soundtrack. If you watch that movie, you'll hear other little incidental music in the background that you can tell is AC/DC that didn't make it onto this Who Made Who soundtrack album. But Who Made Who being the only song with vocals, that's got to be your favorite Brian Johnson song off of that album.
Yeah. Who Made Who it is. Another song we don't do, but hopefully we'll be doing that one soon, because I actually I've actually heard that song more so than I've heard a lot of the older Bond stuff. It, kind of around the same era as like Back in Black. I know that was several albums before, but it sticks in my mind more so than some of the older stuff.
It's an odd song. It's probably the only time that I can remember that AC/DC used an alternate tuning on the guitar site there. This is, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there's a little riff that Angus does throughout the entire song, and he retunes 2 of his strings on his guitar to be able to play these riffs as the chord changes happen. So they didn't do it themselves live, but I think maybe 1 or 2 tours, because it just does. If you don't retune your guitar, it doesn't sound quite right. You can pull it off, but it doesn't sound quite as good as the studio version, and I think they dropped it for that reason.
Thunderstruck is reminiscent of this track because of that part that he plays.
You are absolutely correct. Yeah.
Because like when I heard that, I'm like, oh, Who Made Who? I don't know as much about AC/DC as Tommy does here, but I was thinking Who Made Who came out after Thunderstruck, but when I went back and looked and did the research, Thunderstruck came out later. So it's like they took that style riff or whatever, had it in Who Made Who first, and then they like, oh, let's do something like this, but put it in this song right here, and you get the pull-offs. And is he doing pull-offs on the Who Made Who track?
Yeah, he actually. It's double picking, just like it is on Thunderstruck. It's very, very hard to play those riffs that fast and pick every note, but Angus does it. The guitarist in our band does it on Thunderstruck. It's kind of funny when you see somebody that's just learning Thunderstruck, they will not play it right 90% of the time. And it's because it's very, very hard to do that alternate pick and that fast and have it sound clean and not bang your pick into the adjacent strings and stuff. And, of course, in the studio, you get 1,000 tries until you get it right once. So, but, Angus pulled it off live, and our guitarist pulls it off live. So it can be done. It's just kind of difficult. And they've done it. They did a very similar riff on a song called Can't Stand Still. I think that's on, I'm looking right now, it's on Stiff Upper Lip. Very, very similar riff to the Who Made Who / Thunderstruck type of riff on the song Can't Stand Still. They've recycled that riff a few times, or that technique. I'll say that technique. They've recycled that a few times.
Moving on to the Razor's Edge. Now this was the...
Yeah, wait a minute. You missed Blow Up Your Video.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Blow Up Your Video. For me, that's going to be That's the Way I Want to Rock and Roll.
I'm tempted to go with that. I am very tempted to go with that. When I first got this album, my immediate favorite song was Nick of Time. Now, in retrospect, now when I listen to this album, the song that I look forward to the most is This Means War, the last song on there. Very fast, kind of reminiscent of, reminds me a little bit of Riff Raff, kind of.
Gotcha. So we'll do Razor's Edge next.
Yes, sir.
For me, this was tough. I had to actually sit down and listen to these songs because I listened to both of these songs like back to back, and I'm like, it's so tough because they're both great songs. But I'm going to have to go with Thunderstruck as my number one as of this moment right now.
And what was the one you were trying to decide between?
Are You Ready?
Ooh, yeah, that is
Both
tough, man.
songs are great. Are You Ready would be a great opener, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I know
No
Thunderstruck, no question, is a great opener, but Are You Ready is a good tune. It's a little slower, but it's got a great groove to it. And it's got a lot of gang vocals in the chorus. It's a really good song.
I would argue that Thunderstruck is probably their most popular song now. Back in the day, I think it took Thunderstruck a little bit of time to. Of course, it was a single. It was a huge hit, but then it started being used in commercials and movies and sporting events. And next thing you know, that song had legs, man. It's everywhere, and it's still everywhere. And as soon as it comes on, even to this day, it's got that big crowd chant at the beginning of it. People just dig that song. So I can definitely understand why that's your favorite. And they had a few singles. You had Thunderstruck as a single. You had Money Talks as a single. You had Are You Ready as a single. They were all good songs. Probably for me, my favorite song on that album is probably the song Razor's Edge. It's dark. AC/DC, to me, after Back in Black, they didn't do the dark kind of material as much anymore. They didn't do like a song like Hell's Bells as a dark song, They started doing more upbeat, not up tempo because they've always been fast, but upbeat, kind of poppy-ish almost sounding songs. Like they did Heat Seeker, and they did, Sink the Pink we were talking about earlier, and Shake Your Foundations and things like that. But Razor's Edge harkens back to when they weren't afraid to do a song like Sin City or Hell's Bells or something dark like that. So I'll choose that as my favorite off of Razor's Edge, the title track.
Cool. All right. So now we're going to go on to Ball Breaker.
Oh boy.
Let me just pull this up here just so I can get my ducks in a row here. All right. Yeah, this one for me was tough too. Because there are 3 songs on here, 2 which are singles that I actually like.
I have a terrible feeling what your favorite's going to be. Don't do it to me, man.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. All right, Ball Breaker is going to be my number 1.
Oh, there you go.
The song Ball Breaker. It's actually in a tie, believe it or not, with Cover You in Oil.
Oh, I knew it. God.
You don't like that song?
I still don't like that song. You're right, though. Hard as a Rock and Cover You in Oil were singles. And you said there was the third one? What was the third? Oh, was the third one Ball Breaker?
Well, the 3 singles are Hard as a Rock and Cover You in Oil, but maybe Ball Breaker was not a single. It was actually Hail Caesar was the other one.
Oh, yeah. On that tour, they did Hail Caesar. Hail Caesar is another song that I thought was kind of weak, that they tried to push. It seemed like they were really trying to push that song. But, Hard as a Rock, they did that in concert, I remember. I don't recall them doing Cover in Oil. They definitely did Ball Breaker on that tour, at least the show I saw. And I'm going to agree with you on that. Ball Breaker from the Ball Breaker album is definitely my favorite song on there. There's kind of one song that I think is an undiscovered gem on this record is Whiskey on the Rocks. I like, there's a couple of others, Love Bomb and Caught with Your Pants Down. I like those 2, but they're buried at the end of side 2.
Yeah.
And, I think that most people, if something hasn't really grabbed them in the first 4 or 5 songs from side 1, they kind of fade by the time they get to like the 8th and 9th and 10th songs. And that's what happened with Ball Breaker. I believe people didn't pay that much attention to Love Bomb or Caught with Your Pants Down or Whiskey on the Rocks because, Boogeyman and The Fuhrer and Burning Alive were not stellar AC/DC songs. And then they close out the record, 11th song on it, the title track of the album, Ball Breaker, and they come back just swinging, man. And
yeah, they're like, here for these songs you probably won't like. Here's one that'll kick your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, why didn't they put that? I understand why they do Hard as a Rock because that's on my list too. But Ball Breaker, they should have probably put that first on the album
I wouldn't disagree with you, man. That was a killer song. They did it live, and it sounds tough as hell live. And just as a little side note, if you can go back and look on YouTube, and I think maybe search something like Brian Forgets His Mic or something like that. There's an AC/DC live show from the Ball Breaker tour. On the song Ball Breaker, they would drop the wrecking ball down, and Brian Johnson would hop up on it and ride it. This is years before, frickin' Britney Spears or whoever the hell else did that.
Miley Cyrus.
Miley Cyrus, there you go. but Brian Johnson had a wireless mic, and he would put it in the waistband of his jeans. And he forgot to put it in the waistband of his jeans, and he jumped up on the ball, and they hauled his ass up in the, up 10, 20 feet in the air. And the band is playing the song, and he has no mic to sing into.
That's pretty funny.
So they had to lower the ball back down and give him his mic for him to sing the song. So for probably a minute, the band is just crushing along going, Grandad, Grandad. And they're just doing that over and over and over for like a minute while Brian gets his shit together.
Oh, man, I bet their stage manager got
But,
out
AC/DC is a well-oiled machine, so to see them actually make a mistake is rare. So that's pretty funny.
Yeah. Next album is Stiff Upper Lip. For me, title track, Stiff Upper Lip, is the best one on there. The one that I like the best. My favorite.
Yeah, this one is tough for me, not in the reason that you might think. I'm not looking at it going, well, there's 5 choices here. I'm looking at it going, man, this is probably my least favorite AC/DC album. And that's, a bad AC/DC album is still better than most people's good albums. So don't hate me because I said that. But on this record, there's not a lot on it that are classic must-hear AC/DC songs. The very first song that grabbed me, and probably my favorite to this day, is Meltdown. And it's a funny thing, when they started the Stiff Upper Lip tour, they played the song Stiff Upper Lip, obviously, but they also played Meltdown. And they had they had singles. They had Stiff Upper Lip and New Satellite Blues, but in the lyrics it's New Satellite Blues. But at the merch table, they actually had a specific shirt for the song Meltdown, as if they thought that was going to be a huge song for them or something. It was Frankenstein. And I think I don't know if there was lightning hitting into the bolts on his neck, but he was melting, or his face was melting, or the bolts were melting or something. I don't remember it, vividly now, but I do remember them having a specific shirt that said AC/DC Meltdown, and it was Frankenstein's head with the bolts. And unfortunately, the show that I saw on that tour, they had dropped Meltdown by then, because it wasn't taken off as a live cut. People weren't responding to it, so they dropped it. But that's my favorite song off there. I do like Stiff Upper Lip. That's a cool song, and it's got an unusual finger-picked riff from Angus on that. So that is a cool song. I do like that, but Meltdown's my favorite.
Yeah, and I was going to add Safe in New York City. I like that one, too. That'd probably be my second one. That was also a single, and
That's right.
Satellite Blues was the third single off that album. But
that's right. And they did do Safe in New York City live. And then later on, of course, we, off the Stiff Upper Lip album, we're talking about Stiff Upper Lip, off of the Power Up album, Demon Fire has a lot of that Safe in New York City feel to it. It's got almost the same kind of feel to that.
I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
That brings us to the infamous Black Ice album.
Black Ice, something of a comeback for them. It really sold a lot of records. Had 3 different covers. Well, 3 different. It was a black cover, and then the AC/DC was in different colors depending on which version you got. But they was all the same songs. They weren't different versions of the album. They had there you go. You've got the red one showing. They had a yellow one. They had a blue one. I've got the blue one. But it was a Walmart exclusive. I remember going over there at 7 a.m. the day it was released and buying that on my way to work. My favorite song off of Black Ice is probably, oh boy. Now I do have more than one choice off of this one. This is not one of my favorite albums by them, and I did not like it as much as most people did at the time, nor do I like it as much as most people seem to now. But it did have some good songs on it. I'll say my favorite on it is Skies on Fire, which is probably an unusual choice for most people. I'm going to give an honorable mention to War Machine. That was a cool song too.
Yeah, War Machine is a pretty cool song. I think for mine, now this one was actually tough. I had to listen to these songs over and over to really pick the right one. I'm going to go with Big Jack as my favorite off this album. I've seen him play it live, and it's. I hadn't heard the song until I watched the concert from River Plate. That's where I heard it for the first time. I was like, man, this song is pretty rocking, and the chord progression that they use during the verse throws you off a little bit. And that's what I like about it. It's like, din and it's like so off.
Yeah, it's a cool song.
It's a tie with Rock and Roll Train.
Okay.
Which they actually opened the tour with that song.
Yeah, that was a big song back then.
And the energy that they have when that song kicks in and Angus starts strutting across the stage and the crowd's, bouncing up and down. It's like, at this point in the game, they can play any song and it's going to happen like that at every show when they come out. Regardless of the explosions or the the train coming through the backdrop or whatever, it doesn't matter. They're just going to have a ball doing it.
They did a pretty good push on that album when it was big out of the gate pretty much, but on tour, AC/DC's got such a huge amount of songs in their back catalog that usually from the newest album you get one or two songs. But on the Black Ice tour, they did, if I recall correctly, they did Rock and Roll Train, they did Big Jack for sure, they did War Machine, and they did Money Made, and they did Black Ice. So that's a lot of songs off of their newest record. And with AC/DC, when you pick that many songs off your new record, that means you're dropping something like Problem Child or Sin City or Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. Big songs that people want to hear. So it's tough for them to do a lot of songs off their newest album. But on that album, they really did. They said, we're going to promote this new album. They must have been pretty proud of it. And it's a good album. It's not my favorite or anything, but it's a good album.
Yeah, I've actually come to like this album a lot. Like I said, Rock and Roll Train, Big Jack, those are the biggest two on there in my opinion. Not too familiar with the rest of them, or they don't stick in my brain like these two do. They're just heavy hitters. Right. Let's see. Next one is going to be Rock or Bust.
Rock or Bust, baby.
Now, for me, this album, title track, Rock or Bust, favorite song.
I think I would agree with you there. And this is the second album that I'm going to say that I felt like they really chose the weakest song on the album to be the single. I didn't think anything of the song Play Ball. It was barely okay as an AC/DC song. But there's a lot of good stuff on this album. I think this album really gets shortchanged by even pretty decent fans of the band don't seem to like this album. But I gotta say, man, well, the title track also my favorite. But Misadventure, man, Dogs of War, Rock and Roll Thunder, Hard Times, Baptism of Fire, Rock the House. Man, so many good songs on this album. I think people just didn't give it enough of a chance. One thing that I noticed on this album, AC/DC is big on chords. They play a lot of chordal riffs, but this one had several single string riffs, which is more of a Zeppelin-y kind of feel to it. And I thought a couple or three of the songs on this album had a Zeppelin kind of feel to them because of the single string riffs. Heavy as hell, man, and just a good record, man. I don't know why people don't like it, but I'm with you. Rock or Bust, the title track is my favorite song off of that album.
I'll have to give that album another chance. It's just, once I hear those two songs, it's like I can't listen to the rest of it, but maybe I'll have to sit and listen from front to back and give my honest opinion about that.
Yeah, some good stuff on there, man. The song Baptism by Fire, you'll hear a little bit of it's got a kind of a Sin City-ish type of riff to it. It's a single note riff, and it's a long, it reminds me of the intro to Sin City. I shouldn't say the whole song, but that da 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 dum. Well,
Right.
Baptism of Fire has a riff sort of like that, only it's a lot longer, but it's all single notes and it's in the same key and blah blah blah. But it reminds me of Sin City a little bit.
All right. So brings us to the final, as of this moment, Brian Johnson album, Power Up. Like we were talking about earlier in the previous podcast, the previews of these videos that came out like way before they released the album were pretty cool. This video just came out probably, I think this video came out in October of last year. For the single Through the Mist of Time is my favorite track off this album.
Oh, damn, I wasn't even thinking about that one. I should have guessed that one for you. Got the Power Up shirt on here. There you go.
Oh, cool. Is that is that one that you bought separately, or did that come with the set, an album set?
Actually, my wife got that one for me for Christmas.
Cool.
But I bought the deluxe set, but the one I got didn't come with a shirt. So this record got some good songs on it, man, and I totally respect Through the Mist of Time. It's probably, in my opinion, it's probably the least AC/DC song that AC/DC has ever recorded, but still, it's pretty good. My immediate favorite on it when I first got the album was Kick You When You're Down. I still love that song. But probably, you know what? I'd still say that's my favorite. I'd still say Kick You When You're Down is probably my favorite. But I do like quite a bit Realize, the very first song on it. I think because every time I took this album with me everywhere I went when it first came out. And so I put it in the car and I'd end up listening to Realize and Rejection and Shot in the Dark. And then I'd get out of the car and then I'd get back in the car and I'd start it over again, and I probably started it over a bazillion times. So like the last few songs on it, I don't know as much.
Right.
No Man's Land, Systems Down, Money Shot, Code Red. I don't know those very well, but damn, I know Realize because I've listened to it probably, I've probably listened to Code Red and Money Shot, 3 times each. I've listened to Realize about 50, because I kept listening to it and listening to it and listening to it. So for me, Kick You When You're Down, and with strong respect for Realize and Shot in the Dark. And I'll even give a little nod to your favorite, Through the Mist of Time. It's a cool song. It just doesn't sound like AC/DC to me.
Yeah, I was going to say that it has kind of a, how do I want to put this? Kind of like a pop rock feel to it.
Absolutely,
we were talking
man.
about pop rock songs like Shook Me or Thunderstruck. They're good radio songs. And there's another song that I forgot about when we were talking about Black Ice. I believe it's Anything Goes.
Yeah.
Kind of has the same feel as this song. So if you're familiar with that, and I've actually got, this is a Target exclusive Power Up, kind of a box set. It's got a t-shirt in it and it's got the vinyl. I haven't even opened it yet. I was kind of saving it for my other YouTube channel to do like an unboxing, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet, but I'm looking forward to doing this.
Oh, I wouldn't do it now.
No, not now. I'm doing it on the
No, I wouldn't open it at all. If I had it this long and not open it, I wouldn't open it.
Well, I've had it for, I think I got it in October, November of last year, not this previous one, but I got it several months after it came out is when I got it.
Right.
That would have been probably, about 4 or 5 months after it came out. So it would have been earlier than October. It would have been like May or so, something in 2021.
It's funny that from Power Up, neither one of us chose Shot in the Dark as our favorite. And that was the first single off of this album, the first song they released. And I will say, that's a hell of a song. That is a really good song. It's got that little Angus riff at the beginning of it, great chords, cool sing-along chorus. Everything about that song is spot on AC/DC. So that one I felt like was a really good song to reintroduce AC/DC to the masses again. It had been, years since they'd had a new album. And of course, this one was made from riff ideas that Malcolm and Angus had, and Angus had just been sitting on, and he went through them all and kind of pieced them together as songs. And it actually turned out to be a really thoroughly decent AC/DC album, man. No matter the struggles or how it was pieced together, no matter that Malcolm was missing, it's still a pretty damn good record. And it reminds me a little bit of Razor's Edge in that early AC/DC records, when you listen to like Let There Be Rock and Dirty Deeds, they sound real trashy and like they're all loose and kind of unhinged sounding. Razor's Edge sounded really, really polished. Still good, still great AC/DC music, but it was very much more polished, and the instruments all sounded much cleaner and clearer. And Power Up has that same sort of production on it to me. Really, everything is so clean and so clear and punchy. It's a well-produced record, and it's got good songs on it.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. There are a lot of good songs on here, and the production on the drums is just ridiculous. The drum sound itself is kind of raw, but when you get to like on the high end part, the mid range, the cymbals are really, really loud. It's like the hi-hats, they're like crushing your ears. And for some reason, I'm like, why are the drums so loud on this album? But it just kind of works with everything.
Yeah.
The way the mix is.
I understand what you're saying about the drums. They do sound powerful and kind of big. On my favorite song, Kick You When You're Down, he rides on the low tom, instead of the hi-hat.
Yeah.
During the choruses, he's riding that low tom, and that thing is really thumping, man. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So that was a run through the Brian Johnson stuff. And one of these days, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pick up all of Bon Scott's albums, and we'll just roll through those and pick our favorite songs on that.
And I think actually on that episode, for the Bon episode, I think we're going to try to get a special guest in here. We'll get our singer For Those About to Rock in here, and he can include his input on his favorite Bon songs, because he's a Bon man for sure.
Yeah, he definitely knows his Bon stuff. And in our tribute band, we cover both Bon and Brian eras, and that's tough for any singer. And our singer, you can tell he sounds more like Bon, I think, and he knows it. I mean, he really knows it well. I mean, that stuff is, he's definitely spent a half a lifetime listening to it, just like I have.
He's definitely got his own style when it comes to putting both of the guys together. He does Bon, he does Brian, he does a little bit in between, but he's kind of like, I think he explained it to me one time before. He's like, it's Brian trying to sing Bon, trying to sing Brian, or something like that.
That sounds about right.
It's
cool. It's cool though. We have had the privilege of hearing since 1980. We've had the privilege of hearing the real Brian Johnson singing Bon songs. We've never had the privilege of hearing Bon try to sing "You Shook Me All Night Long" or "Back in Black" or "For Those of Us Rock" or any of the Brian era songs. That can't happen. So when you've got a singer that sounds closer to Bon than Brian, and he's singing those Brian era songs with almost a more Bon tone to his voice, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like you and I, and anybody that comes to use our band, does get to hear maybe a little bit of what it would have sounded like had Bon recorded those songs.
Right. Yeah. It's got a really bluesy style. And Brian Johnson actually does there's some blues, tenure in there in his voice, but he's also got that gravel. And our Brian Sideshow Bon Johnson has his kind of in the middle there. He's got the little bit of the gravel, but he's also got the soul of Bon, and the soul comes through more when he's trying to project the Brian Johnson songs. And it sounds like Bon Scott singing Brian Johnson.
he does that. That's enough kissing his ass.
Yeah, we'll get him in here, and he can.
Yeah, we're gonna have him in here for the Bond show, and all I'm gonna do is every song that he picks, I'm gonna say that song sucks. When he picks his favorite song, I'm gonna say, "Well, damn, I'm surprised that's your favorite song. You sing it so shitty." Untrue, people. Untrue.
We're not going to down tune that song for you. You're just going to have to sing it in its regular key.
Yeah, no, our singer kicks ass, man. He's good and he knows his bond.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this episode of For Those About to Talk, the ACDC podcast. I'm Eddie Payne, your host, and this is Tommy Pearson, and we will talk to you next time. See ya.
Adios.
For Those About to Talk, the ACDC podcast has been produced and hosted by Eddie Payne, along with co-host Tommy Pearson. Show intro voiceover by Jerry James. For Those About to Talk, the ACDC podcast is on the following platforms: Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music. For video of today's podcast, please join us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook, also on Instagram. Just search For Those About to Talk, the ACDC podcast. Thank you for listening and watching. We hope you'll join us again soon.